Some secrets don't break a marriage. They reveal the cracks that were already there. Michael Parker had never been the dramatic type. He didn't shout, didn't argue loudly, didn't slam doors or throw things. His emotions lived quietly like soft waves brushing the shore, steady and dependable. People admired that about him. They called him calm, patient, grounded. And for most of his life, he believed those traits kept his marriage safe. But lately, silence had begun to feel heavier than words. Some evenings, Michael sat alone in the living room, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the old wooden clock his wife, Claire, loved so much. The house was peaceful, too peaceful at times. A place where every shadow reminded him of something missing, something unspoken. He wasn't unhappy. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sure what he was supposed to feel. He just felt something slipping. Maybe it was the late nights when Claire stayed out longer than usual. Maybe it was the way she kept her phone close, turning the screen away without realizing it. Or maybe it was simply the change he felt but couldn't explain the distance that wasn't physical, but emotional, like she was standing in the same room but miles away. He tried to brush it off. Work had been overwhelming for her. She'd been helping her sister Hannah with personal struggles, or so she said. Life moved in seasons, and not all seasons were easy. That's what he told himself every night as he washed their dinner plates, wiped the counters, and listened to the quiet that stretched too long between them. Still, something inside him whispered that he wasn't imagining things. One rainy Tuesday morning, the whisper grew louder. Michael woke before dawn, the sky still painted in deep navy shades. He walked downstairs for coffee, expecting to find Claire curled up on the couch, as she often was lately, awake before him but lost in her thoughts. Instead, the downstairs was empty, silent. Her purse was gone from the hook by the door. Her shoes were missing. He frowned, not in suspicion, but concern. Walking to the window, he saw her car parked crookedly under the street lamp, as if she'd rushed home and hadn't bothered to straighten it. She never parked like that. His heart pressed gently against his ribs. Not a panic, just a soft ache of worry. Moments later, Claire appeared behind him. She startled when she realized he was awake, as if he had caught her doing something she couldn't name. "You're up early," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her hair was damp from the rain, but she wasn't carrying anything. No grocery bag. No gym tote. No reason to have gone outside so early. Couldn't sleep, Michael said. "Did you just get home?" She hesitated only for a second, but long enough for him to notice. I went to check on Hannah. She wasn't feeling well again," he said softly. "Is she okay?" "She will be." Claire busied herself making tea, facing away from him. She just needed someone. Her shoulders shook slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of whatever she wasn't saying. He wanted to reach out, to hold her, to ask what was really wrong. But something in her posture stopped him. Instead, he whispered, "Claire, you can talk to me, right?" She paused, hand frozen on the kettle's handle, then nodded without turning around. "I know." But she didn't talk. Not about why she left so early. Not about the heaviness in her voice. Not about the endless tension she kept tucked between her words. And Michael, being who he was, didn't push. He believed love needed patience. That trust meant waiting for the truth instead of demanding it. Still, as the days passed, the quiet moments grew sharper. Claire laughed less. She hugged him lightly, like a ghost brushing past. She stayed on her phone more, her eyes flicking over the screen with a quiet urgency she tried to hide. And every time he walked into a room unexpectedly, she seemed startled, like she hadn't meant for him to see her thoughts written on her face. The house they once filled with warmth had become a place of unspoken questions, yet in the soft corners of tears. If you're using like a scanner app and it's like, "You're gonna die." Like, look at this. I get like, look at this. And we all know I've been exploring. Michael's hope still lived. He wanted to believe that whatever was happening wasn't about betrayal or lies. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she was protecting someone. Maybe she just didn't know how to share the weight she carried. Michael wasn't a mind reader, but he was a man in love, and love even when wounded. Tries to understand first. On a quiet evening at the end of that same week, as a soft drizzle tapped against the windows, Claire sat beside him on the couch. She looked pale, thoughtful, as if she'd been wrestling with a decision for hours. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low and fragile. Michael felt his breath catch not in fear, but in the deep awareness that something important was coming. He turned toward her, patient as always, waiting with gentle eyes. "Okay," he said carefully. "I'm listening." But before she spoke, her phone buzzed. One glance at the screen changed her entire expression. Her face tightened. Her breath caught, and in a moment that felt painfully clear, she whispered, "I have to go." She grabbed her coat. She rushed out the door, and Michael, frozen on the couch, realized something he had been trying not to acknowledge for weeks. Whatever was happening, it had already begun. When Claire rushed out the door that evening, Michael didn't follow her. It wasn't because he didn't care, quite the opposite. He cared so deeply that he didn't want to corner her, didn't want to force a confession she wasn't ready to give. Instead, he sat quietly on the couch, listening to the rain and letting memories rise to the surface. It was strange how the present felt so heavy, while the past felt light, warm, almost golden. He closed his eyes and let his mind flip back to the day he first met Claire Parker. She had walked into the bookstore, where he worked after college, shaking rain from her jacket and shivering from the October wind. She looked lost but determined, like someone searching for something she wasn't ready to name. When he asked if she needed help finding a book, she laughed softly and said, "Honestly, I just needed a quiet place to breathe." That was Claire. Even then, gentle but guarded, warm but carrying a sadness she never spoke aloud. He had handed her a cup of the shop's free coffee, the one nobody ever drank because it tasted faintly like cardboard. But she accepted it gratefully, holding the warm cup between her palms, smiling at him like he had given her something meaningful. They talked for hours, not about big things. It's just the simple stuff that makes people feel human. Favorite childhood movies. The first time they felt truly proud of themselves. The moment they realized life wasn't going to turn out like the stories in books. "Everyone deserves a chapter where things finally start to make sense," she had said. Quietly, he remembered, thinking she was the kind of person who deserved every good thing life could offer. One memory flowed into another. The spring festival in their hometown. When they had been dating for only 3 months, music floated in the warm air. Children ran through the streets with painted faces, and Claire walked beside him with a soft smile that glowed under the lantern lights. She wasn't carefree. She never had been, but with him, she allowed herself small moments of ease. He remembered her slipping her hand into his as they wandered between the booths. She held it lightly at first, almost apologetically, as if afraid he might not want her to. He remembered squeezing her hand gently, letting her know she didn't have to hesitate. When she looked up at him that night, eyes bright, cheeks warm, he felt something settle in his chest. Something unmistakable. Something like home. Their past wasn't perfect, but it was full of quiet moments that stitched their lives together. Yet, for all the closeness they shared, there were pieces of Claire's story he never reached. She kept certain memories locked behind expressions he grew familiar with: tight smiles, distant eyes, a soft sigh before changing the subject. Whenever she grew overwhelmed, she pulled away, not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't know how to let someone else carry the weight she'd been holding alone for years. He loved her anyway, fully, patiently, even when her silence left him guessing. But now, as he sat in their living room, listening to the echo of the door she had rushed through, he wondered if part of their current distance was rooted in a past that had never fully healed. A soft memory drifted in, unexpected and tender. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. They hadn't planned anything extravagant. Money had been tight that year, and work had left them both exhausted. But Claire had spent the whole morning baking a simple vanilla cake. Humming quietly as she sifted flour and beat the batter by hand, Michael walked into the kitchen to find her wearing an apron dusted with flour and smiling at him with a kind of shy affection he adored. "I know it's small," she said, touching the cake's imperfect frosting, "but I wanted something made with my own hands. Something you could feel instead of just taste." He remembered taking her hands in his and telling her it was perfect. Not because of how it looked, but because she had poured her heart into it. Her eyes filled with warmth at his words. And she leaned her forehead against his shoulder, not for passion, but for comfort. For closeness. They had always found each other. In moments like that, which only made the present feel more painful. The distance between them now wasn't born from lack of love. It came from walls she had built long before she ever met him. Walls made of old wounds, abandoned truths, and fears she didn't know how to speak aloud. Michael knew. This because he had spent 13 years gently trying to reach through them. He wasn't perfect either. He had high. Sometimes the smallest moment changes the entire direction of a heart. The night Claire rushed out, Michael stayed awake until dawn. He sat by the living room window watching the streetlights fade into the early gray of morning. He replayed her expression in his mind, how her face tightened when her phone buzzed, how her voice trembled when she said she needed to go, how she couldn't even meet his eyes before disappearing into the rain. He didn't know if it was fear, guilt, or something else entirely. But he knew one thing. Something had shifted between them by sunrise. Exhaustion finally dragged him into a restless sleep on the couch. When he woke, the house felt too quiet again. Claire still hadn't returned. He rubbed his eyes, stood slowly, and made his way to the kitchen. The tea mug she left behind was still on the counter, a thin ring of dried chamomile marking where it had sat. He touched the mug gently, as if it held clues he could read. He tried hard enough, but there were none, just unanswered questions as he poured himself coffee. A knock suddenly sounded at the front door, soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. Michael's heart skipped. For a moment he thought Claire might have returned, unsure how to face him after leaving so abruptly. But when he opened the door, it wasn't her, it was Hannah Claire's sister. She stood on the porch, wrapped in a long cardigan, her hair pulled into a loose braid, worry clouding her expression. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Michael," she said quietly, "I need to talk to you." The twist hit him in the chest. Claire had claimed she'd been helping Hannah. Hannah had claimed she hadn't seen Claire in weeks. Now Hannah was at his door alone, unannounced, looking frightened. He stepped aside to let her in. Once inside, Hannah glanced around the house with a strange mix of guilt and confusion. "I'm sorry for showing up like this. I thought maybe Claire was here." "She's not," Michael said gently. "She left last night." Hannah closed her eyes, letting out a breath that sounded like a held-back storm. "I was afraid of that." Michael's stomach tightened. "Afraid, Hannah? What's going on?" She hesitated, truly hesitated, as if speaking might betray someone she loved or unravel something she'd tried to protect. Before she answered, her eyes drifted to the family photos on the wall. She stopped at one, picture in particular, Claire and Michael on their wedding day. Claire wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant, but her smile was luminous, full of hope and trust. Hannah touched the frame lightly, her fingers trembling. "She used to look at you like that every day," Hannah whispered, like she had finally found somewhere safe. The words stung in a way that wasn't painful, but deeply sad. Michael swallowed. "I thought she still felt that way." "She does," Hannah said, turning to him with gentle conviction. "But she's scared. She's always been scared of losing people. It comes from our childhood, from things she never let herself heal from." Michael nodded softly. "I know she carries a lot. I just don't know why she's shutting me out now." Hannah took a deep breath. Because someone from her past reappeared. Someone she hoped was gone forever. Michael's heartbeat quickened not out of jealousy, but protectiveness. Who? Before Hannah could answer, Something unexpected happened. A sharp vibration echoed from the living room. Michael turned sharply. Claire's tablet left on the coffee table lit up with a notification. Without touching it, without invading privacy, both of them could clearly read the preview on the screen. A name neither of them expected appeared. Not a man. Not a stranger. Not someone mysterious, but someone Claire once feared more than anyone else. Hannah's face paled. "Oh no!" Michael glanced at her. "Hannah, who is he?" "It's not a he," she whispered, correcting him softly. "Michael. That's the name of our father. The father Claire never talked about. The father who had vanished from their lives. The father whose shadow followed her in ways she never explained." Suddenly, the blurry airport photo made new sense. Claire wasn't traveling with a stranger. She wasn't hiding a romance or an affair. She was hiding a wound. Michael felt his breath leave him in a slow, heavy exhale. It wasn't clarity, but it was the beginning of one. Claire's secrecy wasn't born from betrayal. It was born from fear, confusion, and a history too painful to revisit. And fate, strangely, almost cruelly, had chosen this moment to crack open the truth. He had been chasing in the dark. Hannah sat down at the edge of the couch. She didn't want to involve you. She didn't want to relive it. She didn't want anyone to carry the burden with her. Michael lowered himself into the chair across from her. "That's not her burden alone. She's my wife." Hannah nodded, her eyes warm with gratitude. "I know, but she doesn't know how to let herself lean on someone. She never has." As they sat together in the quiet morning light, something else happened, something small but powerful. A sudden gust of wind through the open window shifted a stack of papers on the counter. A photo slid free and drifted gently to the floor. Michael picked it up. It was of him and Claire, taken just 2 years ago. They were standing on the pier at sunset. Claire was leaning into his shoulder, not fearfully, but trustingly. Her eyes were soft, her expression peaceful. Hannah watched him trace the edge of the photo with his thumb. "That's how she still feels about you," she said softly. "She just forgot how to show it." For the first time in days, hope stirred in Michael's chest, not the fragile kind, but the steady kind that comes from understanding. A twist of fate had brought Hannah to his door. A twist of memory had reminded him of their bond. A twist of truth had changed everything he feared, and now one thing became painfully, beautifully clear. If he wanted answers, if he wanted to save what was slipping, he needed to find Claire, not to confront her, not to accuse her, but to stand beside her in the storm she had been facing alone. Michael left the house shortly after Hannah did. He didn't rush. He didn't storm out in anger or slam the door. Instead, he moved with a quiet purpose, like a man who had finally been handed the corner of a map he'd been trying to assemble for weeks. He didn't know where Claire was, but he knew her patterns. When she needed to think, to breathe, to retreat without running away completely. She always went to the same place, a small lakeside park on the edge of town. It wasn't busy, rarely crowded, and it held one of the gentlest memories of their early years together, so that's where he went as he drove. Sky shifted from pale gray to soft blue. The storm from the night before had left the world washed clean, smelling faintly of pine and damp earth. The air felt fresh, but heavy with the kind of emotion that made his heart tighten. He wasn't angry with Claire. Not anymore. The moment he learned who had reached out to her, her estranged father, the fear in her eyes made sense. The secrets, the hesitations, the late-night messages, the rushed departure. It all fit a shape he recognized deep in his chest. She wasn't hiding betrayal. She was hiding a wound she'd never found the courage to share. And that hurt in its own way. Not because she had kept him out, but because she had been carrying such a heavy weight in silence. When he reached the lakeside park, he saw her almost immediately. She was sitting on the wooden bench facing the water, wrapped in her coat, shoulders slightly hunched. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, a few strands blowing around her face in the breeze. She looked small, not weak, just tired, like someone who had been running from memories that kept catching up to her. Michael approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. His footsteps on the gravel made only the softest sound. But Claire still turned, her expression tightening for an instant before softening into a mixture of relief and guilt. "Michael," she whispered, as if saying his name hurt and comforted her at the same time. He sat beside her without speaking. They stared at the lake together, letting the silence settle between them, not heavy now. "But honest, Dot," after a long moment, Claire said softly, "I didn't want you to find me." Michael nodded. "I know, but I needed to." The wind rustled the leaves above them, filling the quiet with a gentle whisper. Claire's fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "You must be angry." "I'm not," he said calmly. "I'm just worried and hurt. Not because of who you met, but because you didn't feel like you could tell me." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with the weight of everything she'd been holding inside. "I didn't want to bring him into our life. Not even as a story. Not even as a memory." "You don't have to," he said gently, "but you shouldn't have to face him alone either." She looked down, her voice barely above a breath. "I'm so used to handling things by myself. For so many years, I didn't have anyone who stayed. I didn't want to depend on you too much." It was a confession shaped from pain, not pride. Michael's chest tightened. "Claire, I married you so we could share the weight, not so you could keep carrying it alone." Her eyes met his slowly, hesitantly, like someone stepping into light after months of darkness. "What if my past makes you look at me differently? What if it makes you think less of me?" His throat tightened at the softness of her fear. "I could never think less of you," he said. "Your past doesn't change who you are. It's part of what shaped your strength. The fact that you survived it at all. That only makes me admire you more." A trembling breath escaped her lips, half relief, half heartbreak. She looked away again, staring at the gentle ripples on the lake. "I didn't tell you he contacted me because I didn't trust myself. I didn't know if I wanted to meet him or ignore him. I didn't want to disappoint you, Ait." The sky outside the cabin window was turning the color of pale ash. It's kind that appears just before dusk settles and the world goes quiet. Ethan stood near the window, hands lightly pressed against the cold glass as he watched the outline of the mountain fade into evening. His thoughts felt tangled, heavy, and louder than the wind shaking the branches outside. He had come on this trip to clear his mind, to search for calm, maybe even to rebuild something inside himself that had slowly fallen apart. But instead, every hour seemed to stir memories he had tried to bury, memories of Claire. Her quiet laughter and the way she used to look at him when she believed he wasn't paying attention. Behind him, the old wooden floor creaked softly. Claire's footsteps, slow, hesitant. He didn't turn around immediately, but he felt her presence settle into the room like a familiar warmth he had almost forgotten. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice careful, as if she feared even the slightest sound might cause something inside him to collapse. Are you okay?" He closed his eyes for a moment before turning toward her. She was standing near the doorway, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression full of uncertainty. She looked like someone carrying a truth that had grown too heavy to hold any longer. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I've been asking myself that all day." Claire took a hesitant step forward. "Is it because of the trip? Because you didn't know I was the one who planned it?" Ethan let out a gentle, tired exhale. "Part of it, yes. But it's more than that. Seeing how much you've been keeping to yourself. How much I didn't see or understand." She lowered her head at his words, her shoulders dipping as though something inside her finally cracked open. "I didn't mean to hide things from you," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to say them." The room felt smaller, quieter. Ethan waited, giving her the space he knew she needed. Claire moved further inside and stood across from him. She didn't sit, and neither did he. It felt better, truer, to stay standing, face whatever this moment was becoming. "When my sister asked for help," she began, "I said yes because I wanted to do something good, something helpful, something that felt like family." Her fingers trembled slightly. "But when she asked me to take her kids on that trip, the one you didn't know about, I didn't agree because of her. Not really. Ethan's heartbeat picked up, but he stayed silent. I agreed, Claire continued, because I needed space to breathe. I needed time to think about everything I wasn't saying. Everything I'd been holding in about us, about what I felt. The word felt hung in the air, soft but unmistakably full of weight. Ethan stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough to show he was listening. Claire lifted her eyes. An emotion sparkled across them, fragile and brave at the same time. For a long time, I convinced myself that what we had, the friendship, the comfort, the closeness, that it was enough, that it shouldn't become anything more. I was scared we'd lose everything if I wanted something deeper. His chest tightened, but not from pain, from recognition. He had felt the same thing for years. But when my sister asked for that favor, Claire said, I knew she wasn't telling me the whole truth. And yet I went anyway, because deep down, I needed time away from everything so I could finally admit what I'd been avoiding. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with release. I needed to admit that being near you makes everything feel both easy and impossible at the same time. Ethan's breath caught, and Claire noticed. She hesitated, then continued, I thought distance would help me stop feeling what I felt. But instead, all it did was remind me how much I missed the simple things. Your kindness, your steadiness, the way you see people even when they don't see themselves. She swallowed, voice softer. The way you make silence feel safe. A moment passed, long, stretching, loaded with every emotion they had tucked away for years. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again, not from doubt, but from the overwhelming truth rising in his chest. He had waited so long, quietly, respectfully, hoping, but never expecting this moment to come. Claire, he said gently, I never wanted to push you. I never wanted to make you feel cornered or responsible for my feelings. But hearing you say this, he paused, searching for steady breath. Hearing you say you felt something, anything eat, means more than I can explain. Claire's eyes shimmered with relief and fear and hope all at once. I didn't just feel something, she whispered. I still do. The room fell into a stillness that didn't feel empty, only full of the truth they had both finally allowed themselves to speak. For years, they had walked carefully around the edges of what could be. Now those edges were dissolving, replaced by something brighter, something fragile, something real. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the weight on his heart begin to lift. He just didn't know that. This was only the beginning of the turning point, and the truth that followed would test them, both in ways neither had expected. Would you like? Part 6, the final reveal. And the morning light slipped gently through the cabin windows, soft and pale, brushing across the worn wooden floor like a quiet blessing. The storm from the night before had finally passed, leaving the world outside washed clean, the air crisp and almost new. Ethan stood on the small porch, hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching the way the sunlight touched the treetops. He heard the door open behind him, slow and careful. Claire stepped outside, her sweater wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Her expression thoughtful but calmer than the night before. For a long moment, they simply stood there in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, no. This one felt different. It was the kind of silence that arrives after truths have finally been spoken. The kind that leaves space for everything to settle into place. Ethan, Claire said gently, about last night. I hope I didn't make things harder for you. He turned toward her, his expression soft. You didn't. You were honest. That's something I've wanted for a long time. She exhaled, relief warming her features. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of hurting you? Afraid of hurting us. And afraid that I'd waited too long to say any of it? Ethan shook his head slowly. You said it when you were ready. That matters. Claire stepped closer, just enough that the morning air between them felt warmer. She rested her hands on the porch railing, eyes fixed on the distant line of tall evergreens. When I took that trip for my sister, she said quietly, I thought I was doing her a favor. A simple, harmless one. But really, I was avoiding facing how tangled my feelings had become. She let out a soft, honest laugh, the tired kind that comes when truth is finally allowed to surface. And in trying to fix everything for everyone else, I stopped noticing what I needed. Ethan gave her a thoughtful look. "What do you need now?" She turned toward him, her eyes steady but gentle. "Clarity, honesty, and a chance to rebuild what I broke by not speaking sooner." He absorbed her words slowly, feeling each one settle into a place inside him that had been empty for years. "Do you want to rebuild with me?" he asked, not out of insecurity, but because he wanted her answer to be free, unpressured, completely her own. Claire nodded, emotion shimmering in her eyes. "I do. I want to stop pretending my heart wasn't moving toward you all this time. I just didn't know how to step into that truth without fear." Ethan felt something warm unfold in his chest, a mixture of relief, hope, and the realization that this moment was something precious. "We don't have to rush anything," he said softly. "We can take it slow. We can figure out what this looks like together." She gave a small, grateful smile. "I'd like that. More than you know." They stood there for a while, letting the morning fill the quiet spaces between them. It felt different, now lighter, steadier, no longer overshadowed by unspoken thoughts or hidden confusion. After a few minutes, Claire gently bumped her shoulder against his in a warm, familiar gesture. "You know," she said, "I used to think that love had to be dramatic or overwhelming to be real. But you've shown me something different. Something quieter, safer, and more lasting." Ethan smiled at that, the kind of smile that lived more in the eyes than the mouth. "I've never wanted anything big or dramatic," he admitted. "I just wanted something honest." Claire looked down for a moment, then back up. "I think we finally have that now." The day unfolded gently. They cooked breakfast together, simple food, quiet conversation, shared glances that held more meaning than either dared say aloud. Each moment felt like stitching two lives back together with softer, more deliberate hands. By late afternoon, they took a walk down the old trail behind the cabin. The ground was damp, carrying the scent of pine and fresh soil, and the wind brushed through the trees like whispered music. Claire walked beside Ethan, close enough that their hands brushed every now and then. Not intentional, but not accidental either. At one point, she stopped and looked out over the valley, her expression thoughtful. "Ethan," she said softly, "do you think we can really make this work? After everything?" He paused, considering her question, then answered with gentle conviction. "I think we can try. And I think trying is the bravest thing we can do right now." She smiled, soft, warm, real. "Then I'm ready." By the time the sun dipped into the horizon, the world around them glowed gold, and the cabin behind them seemed wrapped in peace. Claire turned to him once more, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you," she whispered.